Hello, I am Alon Burstein, visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Israel Institute Fellow at the University of California, Irvine. Here bringing you the summary of the last 24 hours of the Israel-Hamas war. It is currently the evening of December 29, 2023 in the United States, the morning of December 30th, 2023 in the Middle East. Starting with the hostage situation, the head of the Israeli Mossad, Dedi Barnea, informed the Israeli War Cabinet that the Qatari delegation received a response from Hamas regarding the offer that Israel made for the next phase of the hostage exchange. According to the report, Hamas's response was less absolutist than it was before. If before, Hamas was saying that it is only going to accept a complete ceasefire and Israeli withdrawal from the Gaza Strip before any hostage release, and only then could a deal be negotiated, the current response is that the movement is willing to consider the release of 40 to 50 Israeli hostages in exchange for a 20 to 30 day truce and the release of Palestinian prisoners. Israel reportedly asked the Qatari delegation for clarifications, and they are supposed to talk to Hamas and get back to Israel in the coming days. Hamas representative in Lebanon, Osama Hamdan, responded to this publication and denied it in an Al Jazeera interview. He stated that the movement is maintaining its position of a complete ceasefire before any hostage exchange. In other news, the Saudi Al Arabiya network reported that Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas in the Gaza Strip, is prepared to agree to a 20-day truce and hostage exchange, and that this is being worked out as part of Hamas's answer to the Egyptian proposal. So the last several days, Egypt has repeatedly said that different actors in the conflict have given their response and that Egypt is adjusting its proposal accordingly. Now Al Arabiya is reporting that as part of the Egyptian proposal, Yahya Sinwar suggested that a 20-day truce and release of hostages may be possible. Different news sites also stated that Palestinian factions asked for more changes in the Egyptian proposal, and Cairo is currently working on it. So while this is still very preliminary, and even in Israel there are different statements that are saying even if what Qatari delegates said are true, it is still a far cry from actually getting to the signing of the next phase of the deal. This does indicate, because it's coming from several different sources, also with response to the Qatari proposal and also in response to Egypt, this idea of a 20-day truce and the release of hostages may be brewing in the negotiations. Moving on to the ongoing fighting in the Gaza Strip, rockets and mortars were sent from the Gaza Strip towards the southern parts of Israel, although, as in the last several days, substantially less than previous times of the war. Rockets targeted the areas of Zikim and the areas surrounding the Gaza Strip, near Yitzhak, Sufa, and Cholit. Moving on to the fighting within the Gaza Strip, in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip in Gaza City, the IDF uncovered an entrance to a vast tunnel network in one of Yahya Sinwar's apartments in Gaza City itself. The tunnel network under the apartment was over 218 meters long and 20 meters deep, and contained a vast array of electrical grids, sewage systems, different multi-purpose rooms, including combat-ready areas. The tunnel was eventually destroyed after a lot of intelligence was gathered in the area. There were also substantial bombing raids reported throughout the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, specifically targeting the areas of Beit Hanun, Beit Lahia, and Jabalia refugee camp, where also gun battles were reported in several different instances in the refugee camp. In the center of the Gaza Strip, most of the reports of the last 24 hours are of substantial air bombardments. The Palestinian Wafa network reported that these targeted primarily the Al-Nusrat refugee camp. However, other reports suggested that they also targeted Deir al-Balach as well as Al-Maghazi refugee camp as well. Moving on to the southern parts of the Gaza Strip. In Han Yunis, the IDF is deepening its control of the city, and another IDF unit has joined the main 98th Brigade that is operating in the heart of the city for several weeks. Substantial gun battles were reported throughout the day in many different locations throughout Han Yunis, with dozens of Hamas operatives reportedly being killed. There are also reports of a lot of armored units that are pouring into the city, and they're taking part in the different battles, and that many tunnel entrances have been discovered. Yesterday it was reported that the IDF is starting to take over very strategic logistical areas. This is likely in preparation for the next phase of the war, where the IDF wants to be set up in areas that can control the entire city without deepening its control further. This is likely associated with the entrance of more armored divisions. However, that is speculation at this time. Moving on to another area in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, the Khirbat Khuzaa area, which is one of the most southern eastern tips of the Gaza Strip and one of the sites where a lot of the attackers on October 7th launched from, because it is kilometers away from the Israeli border. The IDF announced several days ago it is beginning its ground invasion of the area. Today it was reported that more units poured into the city and that the IDF is taking control of the main parts of the Khirbat Khuzaa area. Different tunnel entrances and different tunnel trajectories were uncovered, as well as launching sites that were attacked and detonated. There are also several gun battles reported throughout the entire area. Again, this is the northern eastern tip of the Gaza Strip. Regarding casualties, one IDF soldier was reported killed in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of IDF soldiers that were killed since the ground invasion began to 168, and 936 are reported injured. There's a discrepancy in the number of IDF soldiers that are reported killed. Some sites report 166. The IDF site reports 168. However, that is the reason why there is sometimes discrepancy. Regarding the Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip, it is reporting that 187 Palestinians were killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of Palestinians that were killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began to 21,507, and 55,915 are reported injured. There are also reportedly between 8,000 and 10,000 Palestinians that are still trapped under the rubble. These are almost all of them presumed dead. However, right now that figure is that they are considered missing. Moving on to the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, there are ongoing reports of diseases that are spreading throughout the refugee camps, primarily in Rafah, also in the Mawasi area. The latest report is that there are over 180,000 cases of upper respiratory infections that are reported, and also tens of thousands of cases of diarrhea and malnourishment, specifically within children under the age of 5, and that these are continuously spreading throughout the different refugee camps that are very, very, very overpopulated. And some reports state that some refugee camps that are meant to house 1,000 people are housing upwards of 30,000 people, and this is contributing to the spreading of diseases. In addition, it was reported today regarding the Kerem Shalom crossing. So I've stated already for several days that despite the fact that the crossing was open, there are no reports that any trucks are entering. Today it was finally officially reported that the crossing was closed between December 25th and December 28th. I will add that looking at the different reports of when trucks added, it was likely closed several days before that already. And this happened due to different security incidences that happened on the Gazan side. According to reports, this involved drone attacks, raids that were carried out against the trucks, as well as other incidences that led to the crossing being closed. According to the reports, the crossing was reopened today. However, the total number of trucks that entered into the Gaza Strip, according to the United Nations, is 81 that entered both through the Kerem Shalom crossing and Rafah. This is substantially lower than what should be allowed to enter coming from both of those crossings. So it is unclear if the crossing was in fact fully open or if it's just destined to be open. The total number of trucks that are reported entering the Gaza Strip carrying food and medical supplies in the last 24 hours stands on 81. Moving on to the West Bank, a Palestinian car ramming attack occurred against a military position near the Aduraim areas in Mount Hebron. 5 IDF soldiers were reported injured. The attacker was a 16-year-old Palestinian from Hebron, and he was shot and killed on site. Another attack that occurred, a Palestinian attempted to throw explosive charge against an IDF position in Abu Dis. This is an area near Ramallah. He was also shot by the soldiers. No soldiers were injured in this instance. The IDF activity was reported throughout several different regions of the West Bank. Specific IDF activity was noted in the villages of Kafin, which are near Tul Karem, Dora near Hebron, Tufit, which is also near Hebron, and the Farah refugee camp near Tubas. There was additional reports of IDF activity in the Tekoa area near Bethlehem, where one Palestinian is reported to have been shot and critically injured. Several Palestinians are reported injured in confrontations throughout these different areas, and substantial weaponry was uncovered and confiscated by the IDF. 12 Palestinians are reported arrested in the last 24 hours. The IDF is reporting the total number of Palestinians arrested in the West Bank since the war began is 2,550, and 1,300 of them are Hamas members. This is substantially lower than what I stated yesterday, which was the report put out by the UN that stated that upwards of 4,750 Palestinians were arrested in the West Bank by the IDF since the war began. Part of this discrepancy, I will add, may be that the UN report includes the West Bank and East Jerusalem, so that could be Palestinians that are also arrested in East Jerusalem. However, they are arrested by the Israeli police rather than the IDF, and these figures that I'm stating now are the IDF reports only of Palestinians that are arrested in the West Bank, not including East Jerusalem. That may be the discrepancy, or it may be different methods of reporting, or different accountability, or anything else. Moving on to the northern parts of Israel, southern parts of Lebanon and Syria. There were continued escalations as there have been in the last several days. Rocket missile barrages were sent from southern Lebanon, targeting both the western Galilee and the upper Galilee area. Rockets targeted the area of Shomron, Kibbutz Alon in the western Galilee. In the upper Galilee, there were rockets sent towards Zarit, Hardov. There were also drone attack warnings set off in Arab al-Ramshe, Adamit, Granot Galil, Dishon, and Mivot HaChermon. There were also reports of RPG and anti-tank missiles that were fired towards Dovev and Kibbutz Baram. Hezbollah also claimed responsibility for 8 different border instances. This usually refers to carrying out weapons, gun battles, attacks, or mortar fires against different IDF outposts throughout the border. Regarding IDF retaliations, the IDF announced substantial rounds of retaliations, with specific bombings noted against launching sites and military compounds in the Wadi Hamul area. Hezbollah units were also attacked in the Itaron area, and other sites were also targeted in Yarun as well. Al Miyadin and Al Akhbar news agencies both reported later that an IDF drone attack was carried out against a car in Yarun and 2 people were reported injured. This usually fits the profile of a targeted assassination that the IDF tries to carry out. Unclear what the target is at this time. Related to these possible targeted assassinations, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad reported that 2 of its members were killed in an IDF attack yesterday in the Ita Shabab area in southern Lebanon. This is part of the IDF retaliations that were reported yesterday. In other news relating to the ongoing escalations, Ali Da'amush, who is a deputy leader of Hezbollah's Operation Council, stated that Hezbollah has forced Israel into a daily attrition war, adding that the group will keep up the pressure until Israel ends the aggressions against Gaza. He also stated that part of Hezbollah's victory is that they have forced Israel to evacuate all of the different Israeli towns that are adjacent to the border, and that Hezbollah will not agree to retreat to any part north of the border unless Israel also agrees to pull back all of its forces to the southern parts below the Haifa line. Other reports related to Syria. The Saudi Al-Hadath network reported that one of Israel's attacks against Syria yesterday targeted the high-ranking delegation of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard that was arriving to meet the movement's representative in eastern Syria. Reports stated that the representative, Nurat Rashid, was injured, however, more importantly, that 11 prominent members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards were killed. The report also added that the effects of this attack may be more dramatic than the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, who was the leader of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, who was assassinated several years ago. If this is true, this explains the different rounds of attacks that Israel's carried out in the last several days, and it is another one of the steps in the escalations between Israel and Iran that have been reported in the last several days, as Iran started to actually be more active, and rather than just activate the Houthis and Hezbollah, sent its own drones against ships that had some affiliation with Israel off the coast of India. Then Israel said that it was going to retaliate and actually assassinated a member of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard in Syria. Now this may be another step in these escalations. Other news related to Syria, 2 rockets were launched towards southern parts of the Golan Heights, towards Majd al-Shams and Nimrod, in the last several hours. The IDF retaliated against different launching sites in Syria. Moving on to some of the regional developments, the Al Mayadin News Network reported that a group called the Islamic Resistance in Iraq, which is one of the Iranian affiliates in Iraq and Syria, attacked the U.S. Harab Algir base in Syria. No reports were made from the Pentagon regarding if this attack in fact did occur or whether any soldiers were injured. Other news, following reports of cracks in the maritime alliance that the United States has set up, I reported on yesterday, Denmark today announced that it is going to join the multinational maritime forces and send warships to the area. So while other countries are distancing themselves from this alliance, Denmark today announced that it is joining the alliance. Moving on to some of the political and general trends that occurred in the last 24 hours. Former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett published an article in the Wall Street Journal today stating that under his tenure, Israel carried out attacks against Iran itself, criticizing the current Israeli government for its lack of action and stating that Iran has already won the war because Israel is simply responding to anything that any Iranian affiliates, such as Hezbollah, and he cites also Hamas as one of Iranian affiliates, does. Bennett stated that in February 2022, a drone base in Iran was attacked following a failed drone attacks that Iran launched against Israel, and that shortly after Iran tried to kill Israeli tourists in Turkey, I'm quoting, the commander of the unit was killed in central Tehran, implying that Israel carried out that assassination as well. Bennett's article came under heavy criticism in the Israeli political system. Minister of Defense Gallant stated that it would be very preferable if any and all Israeli operations were kept silent, and it also came expectedly under heavy criticism from Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party as well. Other political news, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin spoke today with Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant about the next phases of the war. According to the report, they call this the stabilizing phase. This is the third phase of the war in which Israel is reportedly going to scale down its bombardments and hold up its positions in the Gaza Strip as it launches more surgical attacks against different Hamas units. According to the report, they discussed the U.S. commitment that Hamas will no longer threaten Israel, emphasized the need to protect Palestinian civilians and expedite humanitarian aid, along with discussing this next stabilizing phase of the war. Other political news, South Africa officially accused Israel in the ICC of carrying out genocide in the Gaza Strip, asking the court to instruct Israel to cease all of its activities. Other news, following the UN report that was put out yesterday about Palestinian situation in the West Bank, a special session of the United Nations was held today on settler violence. The U.S. representative stated that 2023 has been the deadliest year for Palestinians in the West Bank. This session came under heavy criticism from Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, stating that while Israel is fighting the war in Gaza and trying to protect Palestinian civilians, it is coming under unfair and undue scrutiny for the activity of some fringe radicals in the West Bank. Other news, responding to the report in Al-Arabi al-Jadid from yesterday that Israel is trying to coordinate with Egypt and the United States to build a new underground wall along the border between Egypt and Gaza, a top-ranking security official in Egypt today rejected that idea, stating that Egypt has already taken action against the smuggling tunnels and that Israel should not concern itself with the border between Egypt and the Gaza Strip. Other news, Israel is extending the evacuation of Sderot and Kiryat Shmona, which are two of the main centers, Sderot in the south and Kiryat Shmona in the north, that were evacuated since the war began. It is now extending the evacuation orders until the end of January, which tells us something also about at least the prospect that Israel sees in terms of a scaling down in the level of rockets and in the heightened level of security threats in the war. Other news following the reports of harsh conversation between President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu that reported several days ago, and the U.S. pressure to begin reforming the Palestinian Authority, which was reported on yesterday. That in the Wall Street Journal there was a report that the United States wants to reform the Palestinian Authority, but one of the major hurdles is that Israel is holding up the taxes that it had collected for the Palestinian Authority and is not releasing them in order to allow the Palestinian Authority to actually pay the salaries of its different employees. Finance Minister in Israel, Bezalel Smotrich, tweeted today that as long as he is finance minister, Israel will maintain freezing any funds that may be destined for Gaza. He stated, and I'm quoting, "We have the utmost respect to our closest allies in the United States and to President Biden, who's a true friend of Israel, but we will never leave our destiny in the hands of foreigners. As long as I am finance minister, not one shekel will be transferred to the Nazi terrorists in Gaza." So what this refers to is the fact that as part of previous deals, Israel collects taxes for the Palestinian Authority and then transfers them to the Palestinian Authority. After the war broke out, Israel froze these transfers because it stated that some of the funds of the Palestinian Authority are going to go to fund Hamas in the Gaza Strip. After a lot of international pressure, Israel agreed to release the funds, but said it was going to deduct what the Palestinian Authority would usually pay to the Gaza Strip. The Palestinian Authority, therefore, stated that it is not going to accept the funds. Right now, those funds are frozen. The Palestinian Authority is running out of money. This came under criticism of the United States. This is now the response of Finance Minister Smotrich, saying as long as he's finance minister, no funds are going to be transferred to the Palestinian Authority. That is my report for the last 24 hours. I'll be back tomorrow.